All right, take out your Bibles. We're going to try to accomplish a survey of the entire book of 2 Samuel. I struggle with a lot of the Old Testament history passages because some of the stuff that goes on is just really messed up. It's awful. And to think of, okay, God, you are sovereign and you are patient because you didn't strike all these people dead. And we also need to understand that just because it's in the Bible doesn't mean it's good. Okay, the Bible records the greatness of God, but also it does record how depraved people can get. So it's right there in the Bible. So it must not be a sin, but it surely seems like an awfully dirty trick. Some of the words of the great late Rich Mullins. Okay, 2 Samuel, here we go. Events in 2 Samuel. 1 Samuel ends with David and Jonathan dead in battle. Actually, King Saul fell on his own sword because he did not want to be killed and tortured by those who were coming to, kill and torture him. So he fell on his own sword and he died. And so chapter 1, a guy comes into David and says, "Oh, I saw King Saul and he was dying, so I went and I finished him off for you. And here's his crown, and here's the armband." I guess it was an armband on the great cool king or something. And so this guy comes in and he lies because that's not how King Saul died. He fell on his own sword, but this guy comes in and he says, I ran him through 40 days. I finished him off. And he's expecting that David would go, "Wow, what a great guy you are. You killed my enemy." Remember all the people that encouraged David to kill King Saul. Okay? And David wouldn't do it. Say, hey, he's God's man. If God wants to take him out, God will. And God did. But this guy, he comes in and lies. And what's David's response? Why were you not afraid to lift your hand to destroy the Lord's anointed? Then David called one of his men and said, "Go strike him down." So he struck him down and he died. David said to him, "Your blood be on your own head. Your own mouth testified against you that you said, 'I killed the Lord's anointed.'" So David's not playing here. He also writes a poem of grief about the deaths of Saul and his son Jonathan. Now David, for all the times that Saul was trying to kill David, David still stayed loyal to Saul. Wouldn't kill him. He'd say, "No, Saul's the king until God takes him out." And so David shows some great character here. I mean, this is just great that he would be like this. So in chapter 2, the Judah, David's homies, his home crew, they anoint him as king. Now Ishbosheth, a son of Saul, is also made king. Oh, when you have two kings in one country, what are you going to get? You're going to get a civil war. And so sure enough, there's a civil war. People are dying. They're getting killed. And David's kingdom, David's group, keeps getting stronger. The group of Ishbosheth keeps getting weaker and weaker. So it's not looking good for the Ishbosheth people. Some red flags start to come up right away in the life of David, as recorded in 2 Samuel. David collects wives. Now he had 2 wives at this point, and he collects more. Plus he has concubines. Now I don't want to go into too much detail on what a concubine is, but you get this, okay? It's kind of like you have wives and you get to have girlfriends as well. Now, what are they doing? This is pathetic. Why? Nothing against women, but why would you want to have multiple wives? This doesn't make sense. You've got so many more people to provide for. Well, I guess David, he's the king. He can just increase taxes. But this is a red flag because, he can. He's the king. He says, "Hey, I got more wives, more kids, more taxes." This kings were not supposed to do. We'll get into that in a little while. Kings were not supposed to do this. Now, Ishbosheth, gives an insult to Abner, who's the head of Ishbosheth's army. And it's rather a nasty insult. You can read that there for yourself. That's down in verse 6 and 7. And so Abner gets this insult, and he says, "Oh, fine. Okay, I'm going over to David's side. I'm going to take everybody with me, Ishbosheth. I'm done with you." Now, Joab, Okay, Abner comes to negotiate with David. And so Joab, he's kind of like operating like a hitman without commands. So he takes it and he kills Abner. Abner is there to give all the kingdom to David, and Joab, probably a little jealous, takes him out. Remember Joab, not a good person. So Ishbosheth, chapter 4, he is killed. If you want to use the term assassinated, that works quite well. But he is killed, and so the ones who killed him, of course, they didn't do scalps back then. They would just take the whole person's head, and they would bring that, and they would say, "Oh, David, here's the head of your enemy." And David, he responds like this. Rechab and Baanah, the sons of Rimmon, down in verse 9. As surely as the Lord lives, who has delivered me out of all trouble, when a man told me Saul is dead and thought he was bringing good news, I seized him and put him to death in Ziklag. This is the reward I gave him for his news. How much more when wicked men killed an innocent man in his own house, on his own bed? Shall I not now demand his blood from your hand and rid the earth of you? And David gave the order, and they killed him. And they did nasty things to them as an example. You don't do this. This is bad. So here David, he's being very righteous in a very kingly way. And so David ends up becoming king over all of Israel. And they build his palace. I think he gets his wood from Lebanon, just really nice cedar palace. And he adds more wives and concubines. God said, if you ever have a king, don't let them do this. Remember Solomon. We'll get to him. That's a very, very sad story. What was Solomon's downfall? He had like 700 wives and concubines. Come on. That's just crazy. He wouldn't even know their names. But this is a red flag. It's almost like David is thinking, hey, I'm kind of above what the regulations should be, and after all, I'm the king. Who's going to tell me I'm wrong? We don't know that, but this is a red flag. So the Philistines, they get ornery and they get defeated again. You would think that they would get used to being defeated by Israel, but they get defeated again. Now we have ark issues, and this is another red flag. The ark was supposed to be carried by priests. They had those poles and the hoops on the ark. They were supposed to carry it. So they're going to bring the ark to where David is. They're going to bring it to Jerusalem, and they're carrying it in an ox cart. No, that is not how you carry the ark of God. You carry it the way God said to carry his ark. But they have an ox cart. And here's this poor guy, Uzziah, and I feel kind of bad for Uzziah. He's like walking beside the ox cart. The oxen, they stumble over something, probably a Michigan pothole or something. They stumble, and the ark starts to tip, and Uzziah puts his hand out to keep the ark from falling out of the cart. And remember what happens to Uzziah. Boom, he's dead on the spot. And David was not following prescribed biblical procedures, kind of making it up on his own. Now, then we have this thing where David is dancing before the Lord. He's really getting into it. So when verse 20 of chapter 6, when David returned home to bless his household, Michal, daughter of Saul, came out to meet him and said, how the king of Israel has distinguished himself today. Disrobing in the sight of his slave. He probably had something on. I doubt he was naked, but disrobing in the sight of the slave girls and of his servants as any vulgar fellow would. It's not written. There's no biblical commentary on this. But I think that David is showing, with the addition of multiple wives and concubines, and some of the harsh violence in his reactions to things, it seems like David has a problem with passion control. And I think that perhaps, maybe as the ark is coming in, maybe he overdid it a little bit. Now, for example, let's say there's someone in church on a Sunday morning and they lift their hands. Great, I'm fine with that. But if they start going, wow, in some churches they do that, okay? And they yell and they jump and they run around, they go crazy. They're calling attention to themselves. And I can't help but think that maybe David should get his passions in check a little bit. Maybe he's overdoing it. Maybe he's I have no biblical commentary on this. But it seems that Michal noticed this. And now look at verse 23. Michal, daughter of Saul, had no children to the day of her death. So David is really offended that she called him out on this. And so he says, hey, you're not going to have children, okay, your entire life. You're done. What this means is that he froze her out, okay? I don't think it meant that she was sterile. I think it meant he froze her out, okay? And this, again, is a passionate, a very emotive reaction. And I see David struggling with this in his whole life. Chapter 7, there's this really neat interchange between David and God, and where David is promised a forever kingdom. And David responds with great humility, verse 18. Who am I, sovereign Lord, and what is my family that you have brought me this far? As if these were not enough in your sight. O sovereign Lord, you have now spoken about the future of the house of your servant. Is this your usual way of dealing with man, O sovereign Lord? What more can David say to you? And the prayer goes on. And David is incredibly grateful. This is great. Now understand that when God gives a promise like this, it's I don't want to say conditional, but in some ways it is. If I give you a brand new Mini Cooper, a sunroof and, just a brand new one, and I give it to you and you trash it, well, that's a disgusting thing to do. You shouldn't do that. That's bad. And David, I think, does the same kind of a thing. And think of, okay, I'm sorry, here I should say, what's the best pickup truck, like a Ford, like F-150 that's like 10 feet tall? If you trash that, it's just, you don't do this. And the warranties get voided. And so what we're going to see happening with David is God kind of modifies the warranty that he gave to David on David's life and his progeny. So you have military victories. Those are great in chapter 8. The Lord is using David, and the battles are great. And then you come up with Mephibosheth, a really cool biblical name. Mephibosheth is a son of Saul. And when Saul and they were fleeing, his nurse fell down, his legs got messed up, and he was crippled. Now, Mephibosheth, am I saying that right? Yeah, Mephibosheth. If I'm not saying it right, I'll quote Hebrew on you and say that's the Hebraic way to say it. But so, what you would normally do with the king's son, the king that was deposed in your favor, well, you kill them all. Because you don't want competition from Mephibosheth. And that's what you would do. But David says, oh no, Mephibosheth was the son of Jonathan, wasn't he? Yeah, son of Jonathan. So he takes Mephibosheth, and to honor Jonathan, he says, hey, I'm going to take care of you. You've got this land. Mephibosheth, you're good. You're going to live safely your whole time. So he's really good to Mephibosheth. And this comes up later during the rebellion of Absalom, where he treats Mephibosheth really well, and Mephibosheth responds. So an insult. So this is, again, one of those bit of a humorous story in Scripture, but it has a very swordy ending, let me say. So the king of the Ammonites dies, and so David says, I'm going to send him a delegation, give him some gifts. His dad died, so I'm going to do a nice thing. And they don't trust David. And so they take the men, they cut half of their clothing off, and they cut half of their beards off. I don't know if it was a vertical slicing or a horizontal slicing, but they cut their beards off. This was a huge insult. And David said, you guys, you stay home till your beards grow back. We don't want you here, showing the shame. And then, of course, David goes to war over the Ammonites, over this insult, and the Ammonites, again, get defeated. So overall, things seem to be going pretty well for David, for the kingdom. Wars are being won and things like this. Then we come to the huge, horrible turning point. In the spring, at the time of year when kings go off to war, David sent Joab out with the king's men, and the whole Israelite army, they destroyed the Ammonites and they besieged Rabbah, but David hung out in Jerusalem. Do your job. Do the job that God has given to you. What's the saying? Idle time or idle hands are the devil's tool? Is that what that is? Like a Ben Franklinism or something like that? What's that? Okay. And so David is going to be idle, and while he's idle, he's up kind of walking around. He should be out with the other folks, and he sees Bathsheba, and she is in a bathing posture, so to speak. And he says, whoa. Now, what should David have done? He should have said, whoa. Okay. And he said, hey guys, will you do me? Will you please just go like build this big tent for Bathsheba to have the tent things really high? I don't want that. It's not what he does. One evening, David got up from his bed and walked around the roof of the palace. From the roof, he saw a woman bathing. She was very beautiful. David sent in, you know how the rest of the story goes. And she is the wife of Uriah the Hittite, one of David's main thuggy warrior guys. You know, he was one of David's mighty men. And he takes her as his own. And she becomes pregnant through this taking. So David sent this word to Joab. Send me Uriah the Hittite, the mighty man. Then Joab sent him to David. When Uriah came to him, David asked him, how's Job? Hey, how's Job? Hey, how are the soldiers? How's the war going? Then David said to Uriah, go down to your house where your wife is. Wash your feet, make yourself at home. So Uriah left the palace, and a gift from the king was sent after him. But Uriah slept at the entrance to the palace, where all his master's servants slept, and he did not go down to his house. When David was told Uriah did not go home, he asked Uriah, haven't you just come up from a distance? Why didn't you go home? And you know what men do on leave. Uriah said to David, the ark and Israel and Judah are staying in tents, and my master Joab and my lord's men are camped in the open fields. How could I go to my house and eat and drink and lie with my wife? As surely as you live, I will not do such a thing. Okay, David is being thwarted. I sometimes, as I go over this, I wonder if maybe Uriah didn't have a clue of what was going on and he wasn't cooperating. I don't know that, but sometimes it's just what I think. David said to him, stay here one more day, and tomorrow I will send you back. So Uriah remained in Jerusalem one more day. At David's invitation, he ate, and David got him stone drunk. But in the evening, Uriah went out to sleep on his mat among the master's servants. He didn't go home. Drunken Uriah is more righteous than sober David. Okay, it's just what a horrible thing David is doing here. In the morning, David wrote a letter to Joab and sent it with Uriah. In it, he wrote, put Uriah in the front lines where the fighting is the fiercest, then withdraw from him so that he will be struck down and die. Is David murdering? Is his plan to murder Uriah? In a legal way, yes. Okay, in a legal way. So while Joab had the city under siege, he put Uriah at a place where he knew the strongest defenders were. When the men of the city came out and fought against Joab, some of the men of David's army fell. So it wasn't just Uriah that he got killed. It was other men who were up there, the bravest, fighting up by the wall. Moreover, Uriah the Hittite died. Joab sent to David a full account of the battle. He instructed the messenger, when you have finished giving the king the account of the battle, the king's anger may flare up. And apparently you don't want to mess with David's anger. And he may ask you, why did you get so close to the city and fight? Didn't you know they would shoot arrows from the, duh. What were you thinking, Joab? What were you doing? Yours to reply, also your servant Uriah the Hittite is dead. And then David's like, that's too bad. Okay. So David here is being incredibly evil. And this is not just a red flag. This is a black flag on the event. When my black flag went away. Oh, well, I had a black flag up there. It looked really cool. So David thinks he's gotten away with this. So again, it's been said, well, David is watching Bathsheba. God is watching David. Nathan goes to David and tells a little story about sheep, and David, being the former shepherd, really gets into the story, and he thinks people should die, for this offense. And Nathan confronts him and says, "You are the man." And as a result, David's family is going to be cursed. Verse 7 of chapter 12. Nathan said to David, "You are the man." This is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. I anointed you king over Israel. I'll deliver you from the hand of Saul. I gave your master's house to you and your master's wives into your arms. And you gave the house, and I gave you the house of Israel and Judah. And if all this had been too little, I would have given you more. Why do you despise the word of the Lord by doing what is evil in his eyes? You struck down Uriah the Hittite with the sword and took his wife to be your own. You killed him with the sword of the Ammonites. Now, therefore, the sword will never depart from your house, because you despised me and took the wife of Uriah the Hittite to be your own. And there's other things that are very nasty that go on, and they will go on under Absalom. We won't go into some of those details because they're just kind of gross. Now, after this, okay, multiple wives. So you have sons of these wives and daughters of these wives and so on. So you have half brothers, half sisters. And Tamar is gorgeous. And Amnon says, whoa, man, I want her. So Amnon takes Tamar, and David hears about it. David is very, very angry. What happens when parents get very angry and they don't do anything? Nobody learns anything. So David is very angry, but he does nothing. Now Tamar lives as a devastated woman. She lives in her full brother Absalom's home for the rest of her days, and she is just destroyed by this. So what Amnon does, he did what David probably should have, Absalom does, what David probably should have done is Absalom 2 years later, Absalom plans this, and he has Amnon killed. And David's kind of upset about this, but why didn't David take care of business? So Absalom has to leave, and David is just miserable. He feels so bad for his son Absalom. And so Joab sees this, and he says, you know what? I'm going to plot and scheme to get Absalom back because, David's really, really depressed by this. Okay, really a bad thing. So Absalom returns. Now, Absalom, at this point, I think, has no respect for his father whatsoever because his father did not deal with Amnon and what happened to his sister Tamar. So I think Amnon doesn't like his dad, and he works this great scheme, represents himself well, makes a lot of friends, and he rebels, and he works to take over the kingdom. David flees for his life. That's in chapters 15 and 16. Some other little partial stories there, but we're not going to go with that. Oh, now the flag comes in. Okay. All right. So Absalom takes some bad advice from Hushai, will not take the advice of Ahithophel. And this goes on. And so Absalom ends up not attacking. David fortifies his position. Then when they go to attack, David's people win. And now David said to Joab, remember, be kind to Absalom for my sake. Now, remember, Joab brought Absalom in. And now, so somebody goes to Joab, hey, as Absalom was fleeing the battle, I saw him stuck in a tree. I don't know whether it's by his hair, by his neck, somehow he's stuck in a tree. He's not dead. So Joab, of course, out of his great respect for David's commands, takes 3 javelins and puts them through his heart. That's not what David said to do. Then David, of course, now he's mourning Absalom's death, not just his absence, and it gets really, really bad. Joab rebukes David. Now, he's the killer of Abner, the killer of Absalom. He rebukes David for his grieving because it's like, you're insulting everybody. These guys put their lives on the line for you to fight Absalom. Okay, and now you're mourning this guy who rebelled against you, who did vile things. So David kind of figures it out, and he returns to Jerusalem. And then, of course, you have more civil war because this guy, I want to make sure, troublemaker named Sheba, son of Bichri, a Benjamite. Benjamin is the tribe of Saul, okay? They tried to run a rebellion. It was kind of nasty. Again, more civil war, people dying. Joab kills Amasa. Again, why does David tolerate this guy? I mean, either execute him for the murders he's committed, but he just lets him get away with it. It's almost like David has lost some moral resolve. Then there's this terrible vengeance plan, and I'll let you read that on your own in chapter 21. But the Gibeonites, they were that group of people who entered Israel entered the nation, and they were like the water bearers, the wood choppers. And Saul apparently attacked the Gibeonites, and the Gibeonites said, hey, you know what we'd like you to do is we'd like you to take 7 of Saul's descendants and let us kill them before the Lord and let their bodies lay in the hot sun. And David's like, okay, what? No, what is David thinking? Vengeance is fine? No. But David lets us go on. So he defends Mephibosheth, and yet he lets this occur. It doesn't make sense. It's like David has lost his spiritual compass. He's messing up. This all starts with he's on the roof when he should have been going off to war, okay, and his eyes aren't behaving very well. Now, David's song of praise, as I look at this, I think this song of praise was inserted and that this song of praise came before Bathsheba because of the content. And so it's okay if that occurred. I don't see this as being a pre-Bath or a post-Bathsheba psalm. But it's interesting. You look at all the psalms that David wrote, and this psalm as well. This guy knew how to walk with God. I mean, how can you fall from such a great height like this? What was he thinking? I think David just had terrible passion control. In chapter 23, you have the last words of David. We'll read those. We're not going to take time to read those this morning. The mighty men are listed, and who is the last of the mighty men? Uriah the Hittite. David counts the fighting men. Remember, what is Psalm? Anybody have Psalm 20, verse 7 memorized? It's a great verse. Some trust in chariots and some in horses, but we trust in the name of the Lord Almighty. Yeah. David here is working to trust in his men. But it says the Lord incited him to do this. I don't quite understand this, and commentators disagree. But even Joab saw that this was a terrible idea, a terrible thing to do. Joab, the killer of people. But David does it. There's this curse that goes on. There's a sacrifice. David builds an altar. He will not give to the Lord something that costs him nothing. So he pays for the place. And we think that's the site where the temple was built, where the sacrifice was given. So David staves off the plague that was happening to the Israelites through the sacrifice that he gave. 2 Samuel, this just doesn't seem like a really good story to me. David did well for a while, but then he fell with horrible consequences. What Amnon did to Tamar, I fully believe, was David's fault. Because Amnon was just doing what he saw his daddy do. Okay, all these wives and stealing Bathsheba. What Absalom did to Amnon, I think, should have been done by David. Absalom's rebellion can be attributed directly to David's adultery and the killing of Uriah. David seems to have lost his moral mind. Understand. We got to understand this. How important our obedience is. I mean, how many people have we seen that have walked away from obedience to the Lord? We've seen that time and time again, and the consequences they're just awful. I mean, children will do what they see their parents doing. Yeah, let's say for a child is growing up and watches, the dad, beat up the mom. What is this guy going to learn? Well, that's what men do. And so this gets passed on. We have to be obedient ourselves. We have to show that we will follow the Lord. We don't care what happens. This is what we do. We don't change from this. Surround yourself with a righteous cohort of people who will keep you humble. I have such a hard time thinking that some of the servants that went to go snag Bathsheba didn't go, David, what are you doing? No, David, we're not doing this. Now, yes, this is the king who can off with your head, but somebody in his group should have said, David, stop it. Don't do this. Surround yourself with people who will keep you humble, who will say, hey, I'm observing this. Can we sit down and have a cup of coffee and see what's going on in your life? Understand the lost potential. Through David's disobedience, look at what he lost. He lost so much. And again, read through that sometime today or tomorrow. And just, he lost so much because he did not control his passion. Even the author of at least 73 Psalms can fall horribly. Don't think you can't fall. And it's not just a thing of falling in regard to sexual ethics. People have fallen for money. People have fallen for power. People can fall for all kinds of reasons. Remember Rabbi Zacharias? Okay. And if you don't know his story, you can ask me later. He was so good. He was so great. And after he died, the truth came out about him. And now can I even use some of his apologetics? Because they were really, really good. Phil Yancey, one of my favorite authors. I mean, written great books. He has backed off from everything due to moral infidelity. In his 70s. It's like, come on. What are you doing? And then, people are going to take all of Yancey's books that he wrote, and some of them really, really good, how he explored the depths of our relationship with Christ. And now what's going to happen to all the great work that he did? Most people are going to put it aside. I'm still going to read his books because now I know that I'm reading the books of a guy who was vulnerable and got lost. So when I read his books, I need to think of, okay, what do I do to make sure that I don't stumble in these ways? I mean, we see so many Christian leaders. They stumble and they fall. We must finish well. Doesn't matter if you're younger, doesn't matter if you're old. We got to finish well. David did not finish well. I mean, Scripture is full of all kinds of people who finished really, really well. Don't be like David. We got to direct our passions. Just really quick, Deuteronomy 17 talks about the passions that a king could get caught up into. Deuteronomy 17. Okay, when you get a king, the king, moreover, must not acquire great numbers of horses for himself. Solomon ends up with over 1,000 and has the stables built for them. Or make the people return to Egypt to get more of them. You are not to go back. He must not take many wives. Well, how many is many? Or his heart will be led astray. He must not accumulate large amounts of silver and gold. He must learn the law and follow all the words of this law and these decrees and not consider himself better than his brothers. And I think that's what David fell into some of those traps. Direct your passions. We who seek to follow Christ, we get one passion. That's it, only one. And his name is Jesus. So whether you want to take Paul's statement in Philippians 3:10, I want to know Christ, the fellowship of sharing in his suffering, becoming like him in his death, so somehow to attain the resurrection of the dead, find some biblical statement that will keep your passion minded on Christ and Christ alone. I was thinking about taking off my sweater. I've got my Christ alone t-shirt on today, but I won't do that. It's a great shirt. It's hard to wear. Because I had somebody the other day at pickleball say, hey, I like your shirt. I say, yeah, when I wear it, I got to behave. We get one passion. We don't get others. And I think that the biggest thing that I'm going to pull from David, from David's life, both good and bad. Passion is good, but you can't let it control you, except for this one passion. His love never fails. He never gives up on me. So therefore, we're going to follow him all the days of our lives.